Everyone. Today we're going to go over a short PowerPoint about the four main causes of World War I. Yesterday you were given an assignment about those four causes and an article to read, and you were to define each of those items as well as describe how those ideas helped lead to World War I. So the first of the four main causes was militarism. And militarism is simply the belief that every country should have a strong military. It really glorifies the military as being superior than most aspects of a country. A lot of countries that practice militarism spend a lot of money on their military. And this was something that was practiced by more than one country in Europe at the time of World War I. And what this essentially caused, especially between countries like Germany and Great Britain, and then Germany and France, because for a long time, Britain had, or the United Kingdom had really dominated the seas. Their navy was the gold standard of navies in the entire world. France was very much the same in terms of their army. They had one of the best armies in the world. Germany, who was a fairly young country compared to some of the other European countries, they decided that they wanted to become a big power like Britain and like France, and they believed that in order to do so, they needed to be able to challenge Britain and France in terms of military strength. And it gets to a point where it turns into an arms race, where Germany is trying to compete with Britain's navy and France's army, and France and Britain see this, and they don't want to allow Germany to catch up. So then they start to increase the power of their military as well. Before long, you have all these countries with enormous, powerful militaries, and really the only thing left to do really is use them. And that's kind of what eventually happens at the outbreak of World War I. The second point was alliances. And alliances are simply countries that are working together and that would back each other up in the event of a war. You can see the map over here on the right-hand side. There were two main alliances during this time, and it was the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. Triple Alliance is pictured here in red. The Triple Entente is here in blue. There were some other smaller alliances as well, but without these alliances, this really does not become a global conflict. Without the alliances, it probably would have just stayed a conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. But countries felt more comfortable. They felt more powerful. They got a little bit more bold when they had alliances. And if one country attacks another country who is in an alliance, that attack is seen as an attack on everybody in that alliance. The I stands for imperialism. And imperialism is something that a lot of the powerful countries at this time practice. And this is basically where one country goes and dominates another country, either colonizes it, makes it a territory, or just has so much influence there that it's more or less an unofficial colony or territory. But this created another level of competition. There was an old saying that the sun never set on the English Empire because they had colonies all over the world. France had colonies all over the world. Spain, at its peak, had colonies all over the place. Again, Germany was a little bit behind the times just because, again, they were so young compared to some of these other countries. And so when nations began to colonize Africa, there was a competition. Everybody wanted more or less the same land, and it caused bitterness between countries when one country would get it and another one wouldn't. And the last letter was N for nationalism. Now, nationalism is an extreme pride in one's country, to a point where you would be willing to do anything, including going to war, in order to protect your country. You put your country's interests above all else, even if it's at the expense um, of another country. And there's a few situations where this plays a role. For example, France and Germany were not on very good terms. There was a war back in the 1870s called the Franco-Prussian War, and France lost that war and lost some land to Germany, and they were still upset about that. You also had some ethnic groups in Austria-Hungary who believed in things like Bosnian nationalism, meaning they believed that Bosnia should be able to decide for themselves their future. This is something known as self-determination. And it created a lot of animosity and tension and conflict between a lot of the ethnic groups in, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and with Austria-Hungary itself. So there was a lot of tension that was built up because of nationalism, not just in the Balkans, but throughout Europe. And then the spark. All right, the Balkans were known as that Balkan powder keg, and it was just going to take a little event, a little action to cause this entire thing to erupt into a war. And that spark came in the form of an assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the next in line to take over the throne of Austria-Hungary. And when he was visiting the city of Sarajevo, he was actually assassinated by someone who was backed by the Serbian government. And so this created a lot of animosity between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. And then all of a sudden, the web of alliances kick in, and more countries are dragged into this war, and more countries had been practicing the ideas of militarism. So we have all of a sudden all these countries involved because of the alliances, and they all have enormous, powerful armies that are now going to meet on the battlefield. And so over the next few days, we are going to go into a little bit more depth when it comes to these four main reasons. We're going to probably spend one or two lessons on each one, just so we have a real understanding of what exactly happened and why this war got to be the scale that it did. But for today, all that you need to do is finish the assignment from yesterday about the four main causes, the article that you needed to read with the organizer you need to fill out. If you have any questions, just send me an email or a message on Canvas.